Ara stood at the edge of the gathering, half hidden by the shadow of the old oak. The firelight flickered across the clearing, painting familiar faces in warm gold. Laughter rose and fell around her, easy and unguarded, but she could not bring herself to step closer. She had learned to live on the edges. It was safer there, quieter. The breeze shifted, carrying voices and wood smoke. She pulled her wool shawl tighter, fingers brushing the worn fabric. It had been her mother's once. Now it was just another thread connecting her to what used to be. Someone called out a greeting from the center of the circle. Ara turned her head slightly, watching without fully looking. The pack had been kind to her. They did not press. They did not ask the questions that lived behind their eyes. She was grateful for that. But tonight felt different. Tonight there was a ripple in the air, a shift she could not name. She felt it in the way the elders straightened, in the way the younger wolves glanced toward the forest path. Then she saw him. Alpha Veyron stepped into the clearing with his son at his side, and the noise around the fire softened for just a heartbeat. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair silvered at the temples, his weathered face marked by years of leading and protecting. His eyes were a pale, steady gray, the kind that missed nothing. He moved with quiet authority, each step measured and calm. Beside him walked a boy of perhaps 8 or 9, lean and bright-eyed, his hair a shade lighter than his father's. The child looked around with open curiosity, his small hand resting easily in Veyron's. Ara's breath caught. She knew the Alpha by reputation. He had lost his mate years ago, raising his son alone while holding his pack together. She had never spoken to him. She had made sure of that. But now the wind turned again, and the scent reached her. Pine and cedar, rain on stone, something deeper, something undeniable. Mate. Her chest tightened. Her wolf stirred, a low ache blooming beneath her ribs. She pressed her hand against her sternum as if she could hold the feeling down, trap it before it could rise and break her open. No. Not again. She took a step back, then another. Her heel caught on a root, and she steadied herself against the oak's rough bark. Her heart was beating too fast. Her skin felt too warm. Across the clearing, Veyron's head turned. His gaze swept the crowd, then stopped. On her. For one terrible, perfect moment, their eyes met. He went very still. His expression shifted, something unreadable passing over his face. Recognition. Question. Longing. Ara looked away. She turned and slipped into the trees before anyone else could notice, before the bond could pull tighter, before she had to face what she had spent years trying to forget. The forest swallowed her quickly. The noise of the gathering faded behind her, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the soft crunch of her boots on the path. She did not stop until she reached the small clearing where the old stone markers stood, silent and solemn in the moonlight. This was where she came when the weight grew too heavy, where she could breathe without pretending. She sank onto the mossy ground beside the smallest marker and wrapped her arms around her knees. The carved name was barely visible now, worn smooth by weather and time. Lyric. Her daughter. Her light. Gone before she had even taken her first full breath. And Torin, her mate, who had followed their child into the dark only a handful of seasons later. Grief had taken him slowly, like a frost that never thawed. Ara closed her eyes and let the tears come, quiet and familiar. She had thought herself empty of them by now. But tonight, the bond had stirred something she had buried deep. Hope. And hope, she had learned, was the cruelest thing of all. She did not know how long she sat there. The moon climbed higher, casting pale light through the branches. The air grew cooler. She should go back to her small cottage on the other side of the village. She should sleep. But she could still feel him. The pull. The knowing. Her wolf whispered that he was near. Ara opened her eyes and looked up. Veyron stood at the edge of the clearing, his hands loose at his sides, his expression careful. He did not step closer. He did not speak. He simply waited. Her breath hitched. She wiped her face with the edge of her shawl and forced herself to meet his gaze. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly. His voice was low and steady, roughened by years, but gentle in its delivery. "I can leave if you'd prefer." She should tell him yes. She should send him away before this went any further. But the words would not come. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How did you find me?" "I followed your scent," he admitted. He paused, then added, "And I felt you go." The bond. He felt it too. Ara looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly. She folded them together in her lap. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't be what you need." Veyron was quiet for a long moment. Then he took a slow step forward and lowered himself to sit on the other side of the clearing, far enough to give her space, close enough that she could see the lines of care etched into his face. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." She almost smiled at that. It was a bitter, fragile thing. "No, I suppose I don't." He tilted his head slightly, studying her without judgment. "I know what loss looks like," he said. "I've carried it long enough." Ara's throat tightened. She glanced at the marker beside her, then back at him. "Then you know why I can't do this." "I know why you think you can't," Veyron said gently. "But I also know that the heart has more room than we give it credit for." "Not mine," she said. "Mine is used up." He shook his head slowly. "You wouldn't have run if that were true." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked away, blinking against fresh tears. Veyron let the silence settle between them, patient and unhurried. Finally, he spoke again, softer this time. "I won't push. I won't demand. But if you ever want to talk, or just sit, I'll be here." He rose to his feet with the same quiet grace he had arrived with, brushing the moss from his trousers. He looked at her one last time, his gray eyes warm and steady. "You're not alone, Ara," he said. "Not unless you choose to be." Then he turned and walked back into the trees, leaving her with the moonlight and the markers and the fragile, terrifying whisper of something she thought she had lost forever. Ara did not sleep that night. She lay on her narrow cot, staring at the beams of the ceiling, Veyron's words circling through her mind like birds that would not settle. You wouldn't have run if that were true. She wanted to be angry at him for saying it, for stripping away the careful lie she had wrapped around herself for so long. But anger required energy she did not have. Instead, she felt only a hollow ache and the faint, persistent pull of something she could not name. When dawn broke, gray and cold through the small window, she rose and dressed in silence. She braided her hair with fingers that still remembered the motion from years past, tied it with a worn leather cord, and stepped outside into the quiet morning. The pack was just beginning to stir. Smoke rose from a few chimneys. A few early risers moved between the cabins, their breath visible in the cool air. Ara kept her head down and walked toward the communal kitchen, hoping to slip in unnoticed. She almost made it. "Good morning." The voice was light, curious, and unmistakably young. Ara turned and found herself looking at Terran, Veyron's son. He stood a few paces away, holding a folded blanket in his arms. His dark hair was tousled from sleep, and his eyes, so much like his father's, watched her with open kindness. "Morning," Ara managed. Terran took a step closer, then hesitated. My dad said you might be cold," He said you didn't have a heavy blanket in your cabin. He held it out, his expression earnest. So I brought you this one. It's extra. Ara stared at the blanket. It was thick wool, soft and well-worn, the kind that held warmth through the deepest winter. She did not know what to say. "Thank you," she said quietly, taking it from him. The weight of it settled into her arms like an unexpected kindness. Terran smiled, a shy, genuine thing. Then his brow furrowed slightly. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You seem sad." The simplicity of it struck her. No careful probing, no gentle deflection. Just a child's honesty, clear and unguarded. Ara looked at him for a long moment. He could not have been more than 10, too young to understand the weight of grief, too young to know what it meant to lose everything, but old enough, she realized, to notice pain. She glanced past him toward the forest, then back to his waiting face. "I lost someone once," she said softly. "A long time ago." Terran's expression shifted. Not pity, but something quieter, understanding perhaps, in the way children understand when the world is suddenly too big for words. "My mom died," he said, "when I was little." Ara's breath caught. She had not known. Veyron had mentioned loss, but he had not said how or when. She looked at the boy again, seeing him differently now, seeing the quiet strength in his small frame, the steadiness in his gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Terran shrugged, but it was not dismissive. It was the gesture of someone who had learned to carry weight without complaint. "It's okay. I still miss her sometimes. But Dad says that's normal. He says the people we love stay with us, even when they're gone." Ara's throat tightened. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. Terran shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Do you want to tell me about them, the person you lost?" She should say no. She should thank him for the blanket and send him on his way. But something in his open, patient expression made the words rise before she could stop them. "I had a daughter," Ara said. Her voice was barely audible. "Her name was Lila. She didn't live very long." Terran's eyes widened slightly, but he did not look away. "What was she like?" Ara closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the world felt softer, as if the morning light had gentled just for her. She was warm. Even when she was so small I could hold her in one hand, she felt like sunshine. "That sounds nice," Terran said. It was. They stood in silence for a moment, the blanket heavy in Ara's arms, the cold air brushing against their faces. Then Terran reached out and touched her hand, just briefly, just enough to let her know he was there. "I'm glad you told me," he said. Ara looked down at him, this boy who had lost his mother, and still carried kindness like a lantern in the dark. Her chest ached, but it was a different kind of ache, not the hollow, consuming grief she had grown used to. Something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. "Thank you," she said. Terran smiled again, then turned and jogged back toward his cabin, his footsteps light on the frozen ground. Ara stood alone, clutching the blanket, her heart beating too fast in her chest. She did not notice Veyron until he spoke. "He's good at that." She startled, turning to find him standing in the doorway of the nearest cabin. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed loosely, his expression calm and unreadable. He must have been there the whole time. "At what?" Ara asked. "Finding the cracks," Veyron said, "and filling them with something soft." Ara looked down at the blanket in her arms. "He told me about his mother." Veyron nodded. "She was kind. Like him." He paused. He doesn't talk about her much, but when he does, it's always with someone who needs to hear it. Ara swallowed. I didn't mean to. You didn't do anything wrong, Veyron said gently. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them by a few measured paces. He wanted to help, and I think maybe you let him. That's not a small thing. Ara's hands tightened on the blanket. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the blanket, the boy, the morning, the thread of connection that had somehow woven itself into her carefully guarded solitude. I don't know how to let people in again. Veyron's gaze softened. You don't have to know. You just have to be willing to try. She looked at him, this alpha who had knelt beside her in the dark and spoken of second chances. This man who had sent his son with a blanket and stood watch from the shadows to make sure she was all right. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. What if I break again? Veyron took another step closer. His voice was steady, grounded, as solid as the earth beneath their feet. Then we'll be there to hold the pieces until you're ready to put them back together. Ara's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. But one escaped anyway, tracing a cool line down her cheek. Veyron reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed the tear away with the pad of his thumb, his touch feather-light and impossibly warm. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. Not anymore. Ara closed her eyes and let herself lean into his hand, just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be held, even in the smallest way. When she opened her eyes again, Veyron was still there, still steady, still waiting. I'll try, she whispered. His smile was soft, almost relieved. That's all I ask. He stepped back, giving her space, and gestured toward the path that led into the trees. Walk with me later? No pressure. Just a walk. Ara nodded, clutching the blanket to her chest. All right. Veyron's smile deepened, and for the first time in years, Ara felt something inside her chest flutter awake. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled light through the canopy as Ara waited by the edge of the clearing. She'd gone back to her small cabin after Veyron left, washed her face in cold water, and changed into clean clothes. A simple tunic the color of honey, soft leather leggings, and her worn boots. She'd braided her dark hair over one shoulder, fingers moving through the familiar pattern without thought. Her reflection in the small mirror had shown her what she already knew. Pale skin that hadn't seen enough sun, eyes the shade of storm clouds, too large in a face that had grown thinner over the years. The faint scar along her jaw from a fall she'd taken as a child. She'd looked away quickly, tying off the braid with a strip of leather. Now she stood near the path Veyron had indicated earlier, the blanket Taryn had given her folded neatly over one arm. She wasn't sure why she'd brought it. Maybe as a talisman. Maybe as proof that the morning had been real. The forest was quiet around her, save for the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant call of a bird. She drew a slow breath, tasting pine and earth and the faint hint of wood smoke from the morning fires. Ready? Veyron's voice came from behind her, low and warm. She turned and found him standing a few paces away, hands loose at his sides. He wore a dark shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars and the corded strength of someone who worked with his hands. His hair, nearly black in the filtered light, fell just past his collar. His eyes, amber and steady, held hers without demand. I think so, she said. He offered a small smile and gestured toward the trail. This way. They walked side by side, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed, but not quite touching. The path wound deeper into the forest, following the natural curve of the land. Ara focused on the rhythm of her steps, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots, the way the air cooled as they moved farther from the pack's central grounds. Veyron didn't speak right away, and she was grateful for it. There was no rush in him, no urgency, just presence. After a while, the trees opened to reveal a narrow stream, its water clear and quick over smooth stones. Veyron paused at the bank, glancing at her. "This is one of my favorite places. Taryn and I come here sometimes when we need quiet." Ara stepped closer to the water's edge, watching the way sunlight broke into fragments on the surface. "It's beautiful." "It is." Veyron crouched and dipped his hand into the stream, letting the water run over his fingers. "I used to come here alone, before Taryn. Before I learned that quiet doesn't have to mean lonely." She looked at him, something tightening in her chest. "You said you lost someone?" He straightened slowly, shaking the water from his hand. "My mate. Taryn's mother. Her name was Lyra." His voice was steady, but there was an ache beneath it, old and deep. "She died, bringing him into the world." Ara's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Veyron's gaze drifted to the stream. "For a long time, I thought I'd never be able to look at him without seeing her, without feeling the weight of what I'd lost." He paused. "But he needed me, and I realized that loving him didn't mean forgetting her. It just meant making room for both." Ara's hands tightened on the blanket. "I don't know if I can do that." Veyron turned to face her fully. "Tell me." She hesitated, the words lodged somewhere between her heart and her throat. But his gaze was patient, and the stream murmured beside them, and somehow it felt safe enough to speak. "I had a mate," she said quietly. "And a son. He was 3. Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. "There was a raid. Rogues. They came at night, and I couldn't stop them. I tried, but I wasn't strong enough. They were gone before the pack could rally." Veyron didn't move, didn't interrupt. He just listened, and that somehow made it easier to go on. "After that, I couldn't stay. Not in the place where we'd been happy. Not where every corner reminded me of what I'd failed to protect." She swallowed hard. "So I left. I've been drifting ever since. Alone is easier. Alone doesn't ask anything of you." "And alone doesn't hurt you," Veyron said softly. She nodded. "But it doesn't heal you either." He took a step closer, his boots crunching softly on the stones. "I won't pretend to know what that was like. Losing them both. Carrying that." His voice was low, rough with empathy. "But I know what it's like to be afraid of opening your heart again. To think that maybe you don't deserve it. That maybe you had your chance, and it's gone." Ara looked up at him, and her vision blurred. "You do deserve it. You have Taryn. You have your pack. And you deserve it too," Veyron said, "even if you don't believe it yet." A tear slipped free, tracing a path down her cheek. She lifted one hand to swipe it away, but Veyron reached out first, his fingers gentle as they brushed the dampness from her skin. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering near hers. She didn't trust her voice, so she nodded. He took her hand carefully, his palm warm and rough against hers. His thumb traced a slow line across her knuckles, grounding and achingly tender. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said. "Not with me." Ara's breath hitched. She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers curled around hers like a promise. I don't know how to stop." "Then let me help," Veyron said. "One step at a time. One walk. One conversation. Whatever you can give, I'll meet you there." She lifted her gaze to his, and the steadiness she found there broke something open inside her. "Why?" His smile was soft, touched with something deeper. "Because you're my mate. And because I remember what it's like to be lost. I don't want that for you. Not anymore." The words settled into her chest, warm and solid. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she squeezed gently, testing the weight of connection. The strange and fragile hope that maybe she didn't have to walk this path alone. "Thank you," she whispered. Veyron's thumb brushed over her knuckles again, a quiet reassurance. No thanks needed. They stood there by the stream, the water singing softly over stones, the forest breathing around them. Ara closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The warmth of his hand. The cool air on her skin. The tentative flutter of something that might, one day, become trust. When she opened her eyes again, Veyron was watching her with a patience that felt infinite. Not rushing, not demanding, just there. "Can we stay a little longer?" she asked. "As long as you need," he said. So they did, hand in hand, by the water's edge, while the sun moved slowly overhead, and the world held its breath around them. And for the first time in years, Ara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could learn to hope again. The afternoon light slanted through the trees, soft and golden, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ara stood at the edge of the clearing, her fingers wrapped around the carved pendant Veyron had pressed into her palm that morning. It was simple, smooth, worn by time and touch. A small wolf, mid-stride, chased into the grain. "My father made it," Veyron had said. "For courage." She hadn't asked why he carried it. She understood some gifts were meant to be passed forward, not explained. Now she turned it over in her hand, feeling the warmth of the wood against her skin. The forest hummed around her, alive with birdsong and the rustle of leaves. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of pine and earth, letting it settle the restless ache in her chest. "Mind if I join you?" She opened her eyes. Veyron stood a few paces away, his hands loose at his sides, waiting. He wore a simple tunic, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his dark hair was tied back from his face. His eyes, pale gray and steady, held hers without pressure. She nodded. "I was just thinking." "Good place for it," he said, stepping closer. "The forest always helped me clear my head." They fell into step together, moving along the narrow trail that wound deeper into the trees. The silence between them was easy, unhurried. Ara tucked the pendant into her pocket and let her gaze drift over the dappled light, the way the ferns curled at the base of the old oaks. "Thank you," she said after a while, "for this morning, for listening." Veyron glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "You don't have to thank me every time I show up." "I know," she said, "but I want to." He didn't argue. They walked on, the path narrowing as it climbed a gentle slope. The air grew cooler, fresher. Ara could hear the faint murmur of water ahead. "I used to come here after I lost her," Veyron said quietly. "Taryn's mother." Ara looked over at him. His expression was calm, but there was a weight in his voice that hadn't been there before. "I'd sit by the stream and try to make sense of it," he continued. "Why she was gone. Why I was still here. Why Taryn needed me when I felt so empty." Ara's throat tightened. She didn't speak, didn't want to interrupt the trust he was offering. "It took a long time," Veyron said, "longer than I wanted. But I learned that grief doesn't leave. It just changes shape, becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. They reached the stream, the same place they'd stood that morning. The water moved over smooth stones, clear and constant. Veyron stopped at the edge, his gaze following the current. "I'm not trying to compare our losses," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand, at least a little." Ara stepped up beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. She looked down at the water, at the way the light danced across its surface. "I lost more than my mate," she said softly. "I lost our child, too. Before he was born." Veyron's breath hitched, but he didn't turn away. He stayed beside her, solid and still. "I held him once," Ara continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just once. And then he was gone. And I didn't know how to keep breathing after that." Veyron's hand moved, slow and deliberate, until it hovered near hers. "May I?" She looked at his hand, at the roughness of his palm, the strength held in check. She nodded. He took her hand gently, his fingers curling around hers with careful warmth. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry you had to carry that alone." Ara closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears she'd kept buried for so long. "I thought I had to." "You don't," Veyron said. "Not anymore." She opened her eyes and looked up at him. His face was open, his gaze steady and impossibly kind. There was no pity there, only understanding, only presence. "I don't know how to let someone in again," she admitted. "I don't know if I can." Veyron's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a slow and soothing rhythm. "Then we start small. One walk, one conversation, one moment at a time." "What if I fail?" she whispered. "What if I can't give you what you need?" "What I need," Veyron said, his voice low and sure, "is for you to be honest. To try. That's all. The rest, we'll figure out together." Ara felt something crack open inside her, something that had been locked tight for years. It hurt, but it also felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. "I'm scared," she said. "I know," Veyron said. "So am I." The admission settled between them, raw and real. Ara looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers fit against hers like they belonged there. "Can I tell you something?" Veyron asked. She nodded. "When I first caught your scent at the gathering," he said, "I thought the bond was a mistake. I thought maybe fate got it wrong. Because how could I be ready for this again? How could I ask someone else to take a chance on me and Taryn?" Ara's chest tightened. "What changed?" Veyron smiled, soft and a little sad. "You did. The way you looked at Taryn when he brought you that blanket. The way you listened to him, even when it hurt. You didn't hide your grief from him. You let him see you. That took more courage than most people ever show." Ara swallowed hard. "I didn't want to lie to him." "I know," Veyron said. "And that's when I realized maybe fate didn't get it wrong. Maybe it just knew we'd understand each other." The words settled into her like stones into still water, creating ripples she couldn't ignore. She squeezed his hand gently, testing the weight of it, the warmth. "I don't know if I can be what you need," she said again, quieter this time. "Then let's find out," Veyron said. "No promises, no pressure, just time and honesty. And whatever comes after that." Ara lifted her gaze to his, searching for doubt, for hesitation. She found only patience. Only the quiet certainty that he would wait as long as she needed. Okay, she whispered. Veyron's smile deepened, reaching his eyes. Okay. They stood there by the stream, the forest breathing around them, the water singing its endless song. Ara felt the cool breeze on her skin, the warmth of Veyron's hand in hers, the tentative flutter of hope in her chest. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if she could truly heal, or if the bond between them would grow into something real. But for the first time in years, she wanted to try. Can we walk a little more? She asked. Veyron nodded. As far as you want. So they did, hand in hand, along the trail that led deeper into the forest, where the light filtered soft through the leaves, and the world felt a little less heavy. And with each step, Ara let herself believe that maybe this time she wouldn't have to walk alone. The council chamber felt smaller than Ara remembered. Perhaps it was the number of wolves gathered along the wooden benches, or the weight of their attention as she stepped through the door behind Veyron. She kept her breathing steady, her posture calm, even as her pulse quickened. Terran walked beside her, his small hand brushing her arm as if to remind her he was there. She glanced down at him, and he offered a shy smile. It steadied her more than she expected. Veyron moved to the front of the room, his presence commanding without effort. He wore a simple dark tunic, sleeves rolled to his forearms, and his hair was tied back from his face. He looked like what he was, a leader who carried his authority quietly, without needing to announce it. Ara took a seat near the back, Terran settling beside her. The boy leaned close and whispered, "You're allowed to be here. Papa said so." She nodded, grateful for the reassurance even if her stomach still twisted. The meeting began with reports from the scouts, news from the northern borders, plans for the coming season. Ara listened, keeping her gaze forward, trying not to draw attention. But she felt eyes on her now and then, curious glances that made her skin prickle. Then an older man stood. Ara recognized him vaguely from the gathering, a visiting elder from one of the allied packs. His name was Grevin, and his voice carried the rough edge of someone used to being heard. "Before we move on," Grevin said, "I have a question." Veyron's expression didn't change, but Ara saw the slight tension in his shoulders. "Go ahead," Grevin gestured toward Ara with one weathered hand. "This Omega, she sits among us, unmated, unbonded. I mean no disrespect, but it raises questions. What is her place here? What claim does she hold?" The room went quiet. Ara's chest tightened, her breath catching. She felt Terran shift beside her, his hand finding hers beneath the table. Veyron's gaze moved to Grevin, calm and unyielding. "Her place is here because I invited her. That should be claim enough." Grevin inclined his head slightly, but his tone remained firm. "With respect, Alpha, traditions exist for a reason. An unmated Omega, without family ties, can complicate pack dynamics, especially when—" He paused, his eyes flicking briefly to Terran. "When there are young ones involved." Ara's pulse roared in her ears. She wanted to stand, to leave, to disappear before the shame could sink any deeper. But Terran's grip on her hand tightened, and she stayed. Veyron stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Traditions exist to protect the pack, but they also exist to honor what's right. And what's right is standing in this room with us tonight." Grevin didn't back down. "Then clarify it, Veyron. What is her status? What are your intentions?" The silence stretched long. Ara felt every heartbeat, every breath. She felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her, the old, familiar ache of not being enough. And then Veyron spoke, his voice carrying through the room with quiet certainty. "My intention is to court her." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. Ara's breath caught. She stared at Veyron's back, unable to move, unable to process what she'd just heard. Veyron turned, his gaze finding hers across the room. If she'll allow it. The room seemed to tilt. Ara felt Taryn squeeze her hand, heard the soft murmur of voices around her, but all she could see was Veyron's steady, patient expression. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate, until he stood before her seat. Then, without hesitation, he knelt. The room fell silent again. Veyron looked up at her, his dark eyes soft, his posture open. "Ara," he said quietly, "I know you've been hurt. I know you carry loss that no one should have to bear alone. And I know you don't think you deserve another chance at this." Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak. "But I'm asking you to let me try," Veyron continued. "Not because fate says we should. Not because tradition demands it. But because I see you. I see your strength, your kindness, your courage. And I want to earn your trust one day at a time for as long as it takes." Ara's vision blurred. She felt Taryn's hand still clasped in hers, felt the warmth of it anchoring her. "I'm not asking for a bond tonight," Veyron said. "I'm not asking for promises you're not ready to make. I'm just asking if you'll let me walk beside you. If you'll let me show you that you're worthy of everything you think you've lost." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, her hand trembling. "Will you let me try?" Veyron asked, his voice soft but steady. Ara looked at him, this alpha, who knelt before her without shame, who waited without pressure, who offered her a choice instead of a demand. She thought of the years she'd spent alone, the walls she'd built, the grief she'd carried like a second skin. And then she thought of Taryn's blanket, of Veyron's hand in hers by the stream, of the way hope felt when it flickered back to life, fragile but real. She took a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. Veyron's expression softened, relief and something deeper flickering in his eyes. He rose slowly, offering her his hand. She took it, letting him help her to her feet. The room remained quiet, but the tension had shifted. Greven nodded once, his expression unreadable, then sat down without further comment. Veyron didn't let go of her hand. He turned to the council, his voice calm and clear. "Ara is under my protection. She has a place here, and anyone who questions that answers to me." No one spoke. No one challenged him. Veyron glanced down at Taryn, who was grinning so wide his cheeks had to hurt. "Come on," Veyron said gently. "Let's step outside." Ara followed, still holding his hand, her legs unsteady, but her heart somehow lighter. Taryn darted ahead, pushing the door open and letting the cool night air spill in. They stepped out into the courtyard, where the stars spread wide and bright above them. The noise of the council faded behind them, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant song of crickets. Veyron released her hand for a moment, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out something small, carved from wood and polished smooth. A pendant, strung on a leather cord. "I made this," he said quietly, holding it up. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have something that says you're not alone anymore." Ara's breath hitched. The pendant was simple, shaped like a crescent moon, the wood warm and dark in the starlight. "May I?" Veyron asked. She nodded, unable to speak. He stepped closer, lifting the cord and settling it gently around her neck. His fingers brushed the back of her neck as he tied it, warm and careful. When he finished, he didn't step away. Ara reached up, touching the pendant with her fingertips. It rested just above her heart, solid and real. "Thank you," she whispered. Veyron smiled, soft and genuine. "Thank you for saying yes." She looked up at him, and without thinking, she leaned forward. He met her halfway, resting his forehead gently against hers. They stood like that, breathing together, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. "We'll heal together," Veyron murmured, "one quiet day at a time." Ara closed her eyes, letting the words settle into her, letting herself believe them. "One day at a time," she echoed, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could. They stood together under the open sky, the pendant warm against Ara's chest, and Veyron's breath soft on her temple. The courtyard felt separate from the rest of the world, quiet and safe, the kind of peace she'd forgotten could exist. Terran's footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path nearby. He'd wandered a few steps away, looking up at the stars with his hands tucked into his pockets. Every so often, he glanced back at them, his expression bright with something that looked like hope. Veyron lifted his head slowly, his fingers still resting lightly at Ara's waist. "You're shaking," he said gently. She hadn't noticed. Now that he'd said it, she felt the tremor in her hands, the faint unsteadiness in her knees. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Just a lot. I know." He didn't press. He just stayed close, his presence solid and reassuring. "Do you want to sit?" She nodded. He guided her to a low stone bench near the edge of the courtyard, worn smooth by years of use. They sat side by side, and he left a careful inch of space between them, respecting the quiet boundary she hadn't asked for, but needed anyway. Terran wandered back over, plopping down on the ground at their feet. He leaned back on his hands and tilted his head up. "The stars are so bright tonight," he said. "Papa says they always shine brighter after a storm." Ara smiled faintly. "Did you have a storm recently?" Terran shrugged. "Not rain. But it felt like one. People were arguing a lot this week, about borders and trade routes and stuff I don't really understand." He looked at her. "I'm glad you're here. It feels calmer now." Veyron rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "Terran, don't put that on her." "I'm not," Terran said earnestly. "I just mean, I don't know. It's nice." He grinned. "And I like her." Ara's chest tightened, but in a good way. "I like you too," she said softly. Terran's grin widened. Then he yawned, covering his mouth with the back of his hand. "I'm gonna stay out here a little longer," he said. "You two can talk. I won't listen." Veyron gave him a look. "You're a terrible liar." "I know." Terran stretched out on the ground, folding his arms behind his head. "But I'll try." Ara watched the boy settle, his eyes drifting closed even as his breathing stayed light and alert. She could feel Veyron's gaze on her, patient and unhurried. "You don't have to explain anything," Veyron said quietly. "Not tonight. Not ever. If you don't want to." She turned to look at him. His face was calm, but his eyes held something deeper, something vulnerable. "You shared your story with me," she said. "It's only fair." "Fair doesn't matter." He reached out, palm up, an invitation. "Only what you're ready for." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His fingers closed gently around hers, warm and steady. "I had a daughter," she said. "Her name was Lyra." Veyron didn't speak. He just listened, his thumb brushing slow circles on the back of her hand. "She was 3, Ara continued. "And she had this laugh. It sounded like bells. She loved running through the wildflowers near our home. My mate, Kellen, used to chase her." He'd pretend he couldn't catch her, even though he could have with one step. Her voice wavered. They were everything. What happened? Veyron asked gently. Sickness, Ara whispered. It came fast. Kellan got it first, and then Lyra. I tried everything, every herb, every prayer. But I couldn't save them. She closed her eyes. I stayed with them until the end, and then I ran. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't stay anywhere that reminded me of them. Veyron's grip tightened just a little. I'm so sorry. I thought I'd never feel whole again, she said. And then today, I felt your bond. I felt something pull me toward you, and all I could think was that I didn't deserve it. That if I let myself feel anything again, I'd just lose it. Lose you, lose Taryn. You won't, Veyron said quietly. But even if that fear doesn't go away, even if it takes years for you to believe it, I'll wait. I'll stay. Ara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. Why? Because you're worth it, he said simply. And because I know what it's like to carry that weight. I don't want you to carry it alone anymore. She didn't realize she was crying until he reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. His touch was so careful, so tender, that it broke something open inside her. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too, Veyron said, but I think we can be scared together. She let out a shaky breath, then leaned into him. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, and she rested her head against his chest. His heartbeat was slow and steady beneath her ear, a quiet rhythm that eased the trembling in her hands. They sat like that for a long time, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Taryn's breathing deepened, and Ara realized the boy had actually fallen asleep on the cold ground. She smiled faintly. He's out. Veyron glanced down at his son, his expression soft. He does that. He could sleep through a thunderstorm if he felt safe enough. He feels safe with you, Ara said. He feels safe with you too, Veyron replied. He doesn't open up to just anyone, but he saw something in you from the start. I saw something in him too, she admitted. He reminded me, not of what I lost, but of what I thought I'd never have again. Veyron pressed a kiss to the top of her head, so light she almost didn't feel it. You have it now, if you want it. I do, she whispered. I really do. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Then we'll take it slow. One day at a time, no rushing, no pressure. She nodded, leaning into his palm. One day at a time. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that reached his eyes, warm and full of quiet promise. Come on, he said gently. Let's get this kid inside before he catches cold. He stood, then crouched down and carefully lifted Taryn into his arms. The boy mumbled something in his sleep but didn't wake, his head lolling against Veyron's shoulder. Ara rose, brushing off her skirt, and followed as Veyron carried his son toward the main hall. The corridors were empty now, the council long since dispersed. Their footsteps echoed softly on the stone floor, a calm rhythm that matched the quiet peace settling over her chest. Veyron nudged open a door with his shoulder, revealing a small room with a bed against one wall and a window that overlooked the courtyard. He laid Taryn down gently, pulling a blanket over him and tucking it around his shoulders. The boy sighed and turned onto his side, his face soft and peaceful. Veyron smoothed his hair back, his touch full of love, then straightened and turned to Ara. Your room is just down the hall, he said quietly. I'll walk you there. She nodded, and they stepped back into the corridor. He walked beside her, close but not crowding, his presence a steady comfort. When they reached her door, he paused, his hand resting lightly on the frame. Thank you, Ara said softly. For tonight. For all of it. Thank you, Veyron replied, for giving me a chance. She reached up, her fingers brushing the pendant at her neck. I'll see you in the morning? Every morning, he promised. For as long as you'll have me. She smiled, and it felt real, felt like something she could hold on to. Good night, Veyron. Good night, Ara. She stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her. The room was simple but warm, the bed soft when she sank down onto it. She touched the pendant again, letting the weight of it ground her, letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could heal, that she could love again, that she could belong. Outside, the stars continued their slow turn across the sky, steady and sure, just like the promise Veyron had made. If this story found a place in your heart, I'd love for you to join us again.